My question is, what is the motivation for academia, the media, and our government agencies to have doubled down, if you will, on their predictions and their dire estimates of what's going to happen?
My wife was hoping that nobody would ask me that question. But since he asked it, I'm going to answer it. It's all about money and power. For example, there is at the present time before the Supreme Court an amicus brief, of which I'm a signer, that asks the Supreme Court to change the ruling that it made some years ago that allowed the EPA total control over all CO2 emissions because it was a toxic gas. You can imagine anything so ridiculous. CO2 is not a toxic gas. It's odorless. It's harmless. We wouldn't be alive without it. But the EPA said it's a toxic gas because it's going to cause climate change. They didn't prove it could do that, but they claimed that. The Supreme Court believed that about 5 years ago. And now they are considering going back on part of that and restricting what the EPA can do. If the EPA wins that case, they will have control over every aspect of your life. Everything that has to do with carbon dioxide, they can control. They can control how far you drive your car tomorrow, how much electricity you use, when you use it, what kind of food you eat. Virtually every part of your life can be controlled by EPA. Doesn't mean they'll do it, but they will have the legal ability to control every aspect of your life. That's the power part. The other half of the equation is money. It's been estimated so far there's been $1 trillion spent on the CO2 thing. Frankly, it's a huge, gigantic hoax. And it's all about money. All of the people who have been pushing CO2 are now multimillionaires. Al Gore has gone from about 1 or 2 million to, Lord knows, about $500 million made off the global warming thing. The chairman of the IPCC, who's not even a scientist, is a multimillionaire. Lives on his own golf course, drives a limousine, stays in a 5-star hotel, etc. Big bucks, and for academia, which is part of your question, it means limitless research funds. All of my research for 40 years was funded by the National Science Foundation. The National Science Foundation has been taken over by CO2 people, and I wouldn't stand a chance of getting a nickel out of them now, no matter what my project proposal happened to be. So for academia, if you sign on to CO2, you have limitless research funds for the rest of your career. And that sounds like a pretty harsh judgment, but that's what's happening. You know, I'm not going to judge the morality of it, but I'm going to tell you that if you have a project that has anything to do with CO2, it'll get funded. Let me give you an example. Michael Mann, who's the author of the famous hockey stick, was found to have fraudulently altered data. When I say fraudulently, I mean that he changed data that came from his own work to something else. That's what I mean by that. And that's an observable fact. The year after statisticians proved that he had done that, he was given $1.2 million by the National Science Foundation as a reward. That's what's happening in academia.
Thank you for a great presentation. These are just little bitty nitpicking questions.
Oh, good.
I just wanted to know who does the global mean temperature satellite study report?
It's done by 2 agencies. One is the University of Alabama at Huntsville. It's called UAH. You can find this on the internet. And they publish once a month an update of the temperature measurements that they get from satellites. It's done by Roy Spencer, who's a great guy, physicist who does a great job of getting a temperature. The other is called the RSS data. It's also satellite data. Those are the only 2 sources. All of the other data comes from land measurements, mostly by NOAA, North America, and by other agencies in other parts of the world. And by actual assessment, the number of stations, weather stations, NOAA stations in North America, that adhere to their own criteria for siting of the weather station, only 15% meet their own minimum siting requirements. They have weather stations at the end of jet runways, over barbecues, next to air conditioning, exhaust fans, all that sort of thing. Only 15% meet their siting requirements.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a little tiny point. Why is the sea level still going to go up 3.5 feet? Based on everything else, who's predicting it's going to continue to go up 3.5 feet in 100 years?
It's more than that. The IPCC estimate is that it's going to go up 4 feet by 2060, and I think it's 7 feet at least by the end of the century. And that's the same number that's used in the Envision 2060 report. 4 feet by 2060 and 7 feet by the end of the century. That's huge. There's no place to get the water for it.
Right, but I thought at the beginning you told us 3.5 inches still going up.
That's right.
Which is
I
tiny.
misunderstood your question.
Yeah, 3.5.
Where's that come from?
Yeah, was that a lag or what?
No. What's happening is that we're thawing out from the ice age. And as the oceans get warmer, the water expands. And the expansion of the water causes a little bit of sea level rise, which is 3.5 inches for 50 years, or 7 inches a century. That's been going on for 150 years as we've been warming up from the ice age. It's warming and expansion of the seawater. There's a little bit that's put in by melting of glaciers. The glaciers were getting bigger around the turn of the century. They were getting bigger from 1977 or 1945 to 1977. So it's not a one-way direction street.
But
the answer to the question is it's mostly expansion.
But it's extremely difficult for lay people to follow you when you tell us we're really cooling, and yet the ocean's temperature is still going up.
No, I didn't say that.
So the level is still going up.
The level is still going up, but it's going up at a declining rate.
At a declining rate. So
yeah, remember the curve I showed you? It's sloping down. That's because of the recent cooling. Before that, it was warming, so it was going up.
Okay. One more. Do you go to professional meetings once a year or every big meetings?
If you ask my wife that, she'll say I go to a disgustingly large number of meetings, way more than I need to, yes.
When you are at one of these professional meetings, whether it's geology or whatever, how many people believe that we have anthropogenic global warming at your meetings?
There's a big variation, because I can tell you that the Geological Society of America, the American Geophysical Unit, have accepted the dogma that global warming is caused by CO2. And they will not publish any papers that say otherwise. And so if you go to one of their meetings, you get a mixed reaction. The people that run these organizations believe CO2 is causing catastrophic global warming. But I've given papers in Philadelphia, Boston, all over the country. And every time the audience, and maybe 1,500 people they'll be speaking to, will come swarming up afterwards and say, we didn't know all this stuff, and what I've just told you. And they're surprised as all hell, because nobody was telling them that either. So the answer varies with the group. I'm going to a meeting, an international climate conference in Las Vegas in July, and there I'll be among my people, and probably 99% will agree with me. Like preaching to the choir, but that's a select group.
So being a mere mortal, a non-scientist, do you have any ideas about an effective way for us to be able to stop the propagation of these lies on a mere mortal level versus a non-science level?
Since I'm a mere mortal too, I can tell you that I think that what you folks can do is to make your voices heard at the local level. Go to meetings. When somebody says, gee, we're going to have to build a 4-mile-long bridge to Anacortes, you better start now, it's going to cost you this much money, they say, well, prove it. If there's one thing you can do, it's those 2 words. When somebody tells you this stuff, just ask them, prove it. Look for the evidence. And there is now a large segment of the American population that does not believe that global warming is a problem. The last poll I saw was on a list of 15 issues, from war with Russia to the economy to whatever. Climate change was number 14 or 15. The American people are not buying it. So add your voices to those. And the other thing is that you probably cannot believe much of anything you read in the newspapers, except for a select few. Virtually none of the national TV media will tell you like it is. I'll give you an example. Well, on NBC I mentioned that Ann Curry's having a special saying you know, the case is closed, 97% agree, the science is settled, you know, shut up. And that kind of thing is going on. And the more the general public says, prove it, the less people like that are going to get away with it. But to give you the example, national TV stations average 2 or 3 times a week an interview with somebody saying the world's going to come to an end, the human race is going to vanish, species are going to become, all that stuff. You know how long it's been since somebody like me was on? 4 years. 2 to 3 times a week on NBC, ABC, CNN, MSNBC, and those same stations have somebody like me every 4 years. So you can judge for yourself how valid what you're getting in the news media is.
And before, you had mentioned to any of us, if we have questions or like to see some data to help us understand these things, we just contact you, correct?
Right. If you want any information, I can give you reprints from any of this stuff, more than you want to know. I would suggest if you have specific questions about sea level or whatever, I can send you free a chapter on sea level from these books. So it'll speak directly to what you want to know. And so the way to find it, the way to find my email address is just write Don Easterbrook in Bing or in Google, and you'll get more than you want to know, including my email address.
Can we buy these books online?
You can, at Amazon.
Thank you.
They're expensive and heavy, very heavy.
Okay. Dr. Easterbrook, or any more questions? Thank you very much, sir.